Welcome to the B Movie Club. I'm your host Kevin. This week we'll be discussing the 1985 action classic A View to a Kill, starring Roger Moore, Tanya Roberts, Christopher Walken, Grace Jones, the list goes on and on. For those of you joining us the first time, each week on the B Movie Club we discuss a guilty pleasure or forgotten classic from the past. You can suggest movies to me. You can reach me on Facebook, original B Movie Club. Don't forget to like it. Also, you can subscribe on our page on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. And you can reach me on Twitter at KD9575. Please spread the word. Tell all your homies about what we're doing here. Okay? A View to a Kill. In this one, an extraordinarily aged James Bond is back on the case. He goes to Iceland to uncover a microchip. It's a special kind of microchip that basically it is impervious to the electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear bomb. So if a bomb goes off, nuclear bomb goes off, oftentimes there's a pulse, if you will, that destroys all microchips. These can't be damaged by that, so it's a big thing. But what they've discovered is that this was proprietary information technology that the British government had, but for some reason the Russians have it too. What's the story? The only connection is the company that makes the microchips, Zorin Enterprises, has recently been taken over by a French industrialist named Zorin. And they think he might be some kind of connection. So they send, the script gets kind of convoluted here, they send Roger Moore with, the whole team, including a famed a horse expert, Godfrey Tibbett. Okay, they're going to go and find out what the story is at the local horse at the racetrack, because evidently Zorin has horses as well. Okay, so they have to go. They go to Paris because they're talking to another horse expert. See, if somebody goes quickly from microchips to horses, there's something going on with the horses, like they are faster and stronger than they should be. They go to Zorin's special horse place in France as well, where he also has auctions for the horses that he's selling. Okay. Along the way, we discover that Zorin may have been the product of genetic testing going on during World War II by the Nazis. That a certain number of children were given heightened intellect, but the problem is they were also psychotic. So they think maybe this Zorin character is also one of these crazy, highly intelligent psychopaths. So there you go. Along the way, we discover that there's some kind of secret plan of Zorin's called Main Strike. We're not entirely certain what the plan is at this point. It has something to do with getting rid of Silicon Valley. Okay? Why do they want to get rid of Silicon Valley? Because at the time, in 1985, Silicon Valley was the #1 producer of the world's microchips. So if we get rid of Silicon Valley, Zorin, who also creates microchips, like we said, will basically be able to corner the market and be very successful. Yada, yada, yada. His plan has something to do with filling up his oil fields. He has like oil pipelines throughout the Silicon Valley area. And he's going to fill it up with seawater. There's all this other stuff going on. So you have crazy psychotic Zorin. His henchman, who I haven't mentioned yet, played by Grace Jones, Mayday, who's kind of this intimidating... He's Grace Jones, okay? Grace Jones is very intimidating. What can I tell you? So she's kind of a killer. She's jumping off the Eiffel Tower. She's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. She's hitting people with sticks, and it's serious. When Grace Jones is on the case, you know it's serious business, okay? I don't want to spoil everything, okay? Like I said, the plot's a little convoluted, a little hard to follow. They go from microchips to horse racing to... Anyway. Another character which I haven't mentioned is Stacey Sutton, who is a formerly wealthy heiress who lives in San Francisco Bay Area, who also has some connections. Zorin wants her to sell her land. It's very convoluted. I don't know what the deal is, but she teams up with James Bond and they go after the bad guys. So there you go. This script is loosely, very, very loosely based upon Goldfinger. If If you remember Goldfinger, you had James Bond facing off against this evil guy who wanted to destroy all the gold in Fort Knox because it would make all of his gold more valuable. This one, he wants to destroy all the microchips in Silicon Valley to make his microchips more valuable. So there you go. There's that connection. Roger Moore, arguably my favorite James Bond ever. I know it's blasphemy to some people. I grew up with Roger Moore. What can I tell you? He was about 90 years old in this. Okay, now he's about 57, which even that was way, way, way too old to play this. And really, the critics had said that he'd aged visibly since the last James Bond movie he'd done, Octopussy. Another one of our favorites. So, and he knew it. He said, and I had no chemistry with Tanya Roberts, who played Stacey Sutton. In fact, one of the big problems is when he realized he was actually older than her mother. Okay? Which is a problem when you're supposed to be having this romantic interlude. At this stage of the game, it's preposterous when he's like sliding into the hot tub or making out in the shower with these chicks. You're just like, come on, bro. Come on. There's a limit to how much I'm willing to suspend my disbelief in this one. Not to mention he's still kicking everybody's butts. Doing a little karate chop on the back of the neck move that he always does. What are you going to do? He's Roger Moore. Okay? So he said, I'm out after this one. Even I know this is ridiculous. I'm out. He actually said this was his least favorite James Bond movie that he was involved with. He said it was way, way, way too violent. There's a lot of machine guns, and he was like, you know what, it's totally gone off the rails for what I like James Bond to be. And most of the critics agreed with him. View to a Kill is routinely determined to be one of the least popular James Bond movies. I like it. Doesn't that count for anything? I like it. Granted, it's silly at times. It's a little buffoonish. There's a chase scene, for example, where the cops are chasing James Bond. He's commandeered a fire truck, which is very Keystone Copsy. And traditionally, American authorities are portrayed as kind of fools and bumbling idiots, that kind of thing. This carries on through this one. So he didn't like it, thought it was too violent. The critics didn't like it. They thought Roger Moore was too old. He said, one critic said, he's not only long in the tooth, he's got tusks, whatever that means. So there you go. There's that sad thing. Like he said, he had no chemistry with Tanya Roberts, as he's 1,000 years old. And him and Grace Jones weren't even speaking to each other. They had total animosity. For those of you guys not familiar with Grace Jones, it's probably a good thing. She is a Jamaican singer/actress. She was heavy into the Studio 54 scene. She was a model. But in my opinion, she's just kind of freaky. You might have seen her in Conan the Destroyer. She was also in Boomerang a little more recently, but not that much recently. Much more recently. She's kind of an imposing figure, if you will. So what are you going to do? She's in this. Christopher Walken, old friend. We love Christopher Walken here. Star of course, The Dead Zone, more recently. He won an Academy Award for The Deer Hunter, so he was actually the first actor who was an Academy Award winner to be in any of these James Bond movies. There's a particularly nightmarish scene where Christopher Walken and Grace Jones are making out. Don't ask, don't tell. I don't know what to tell you. It's frightening. James Bond at one point has to romance Grace Jones. It's enough to give this movie an R rating, in my opinion. Okay? Christopher Walken is great. He's supposed to be a French industrialist, but really, he's a German-born Russian KGB agent. Oops, spoiler alert. But luckily, he just sounds like Christopher Walken. Because very early on in this plot, there's Max Zorin, the head of Zorin Industries. He's a French industrialist, but he speaks English fluently with no accent. In fact, he has a hint of a New York accent, which is even more difficult to get, if you're a French industrialist. So there you go. Actually, it's interesting, if you watch this movie, there's a disclaimer at the beginning that says, any connection between Zorin Industries and anything real is total, it's an accident, it's, coincidental, blah, blah, blah. Because there was actually a real Zorin Industries going on in the real world at that time. So they had to say, we're just kidding, not those guys. They didn't want to get sued, as you might imagine. Duran Duran did the theme song for this. And it was one of the only ones that became like a huge commercial success outside of it. My biggest issue with all of this stuff, I like the Duran Duran song, by the way, is I still don't know what A View to a Kill means. No one knows what A View to a Kill means, okay? The title came from a Ian Fleming short story, guy who wrote the James Bond books, called From a View to a Kill, which still doesn't tell us a whole heck of a lot. They shortened it to A View to a Kill. Again, I don't know. This was actually the fourth movie where they basically just took a title of a short story from Ian Fleming and then totally came up with their own plot, script. It really was, like I said, it was vaguely based upon Goldfinger, but for the most part it's brand new. After that, they just started going off and coming up with new titles and totally new scripts and things like that. So you have that. In other countries, it's not called A View to a Kill, because evidently that would be difficult to understand. Yeah. So they called it other things like 007 Into the Fire, you know. So it has that going for it, which is nice. Some producers of this film felt that the only reason that they had Duran Duran singing the theme song, because they were like the first pop rock band to do the theme song. The only reason they had Grace Jones, they were trying to interest the MTV generation, if you will. I'm not sure it did that well. Like I said, it did reasonably well for a James Bond movie. It's currently ranked as the lowest rated of any of the James Bond movies. So that's upsetting. You know what I'm saying? What else can I tell you about this movie? The character of Max Zorin, which, as I said, went to Christopher Walken, was originally meant to star David Bowie. Like, that's who they wanted to play it. They kind of envisioned him. David Bowie took a pass, preferring to do Labyrinth with Muppets. Maybe it was a good idea, maybe not. Then they went to Sting, who had previously done, obviously we know who Sting is, but he was also in Dune as an actor, so hey, we'll give it to him. He also passed for other reasons. Eventually it settled down to Academy Award-winning actor Christopher Walken, who, in spite of the movie's poor reviews, he still gets kind of high marks for his performance. I liked him. He's good. You can't beat that, right? Old Christopher Walken's psychic friends. Also, like I said, Roger Moore was way, way, way too old. They actually had to thicken his hair. Some people lose their hair. I know, it's shocking. So his hair was thinning because he's old. So they actually had to do something to it. And he actually had his eyes done prior to this. So his eyes look kind of crazy. People said he has like zombie eyes now. Whatever. What can I tell you? They had interviewed Sean Connery about this movie, and as we all know, he was the original actor to play James Bond. He said, Roger is way, way, way too old for this. It's like, ideally, James Bond should be played by somebody who's like 30, 35. I'm too old for this, and so is Roger. What's interesting enough is, like, Sean Connery's younger than Roger Moore. But they were both, like, 2 years prior, they had both been playing James Bond. Roger Moore was in Octopussy, and Sean Connery was Never Say Never Again. So there you go. This movie currently has a 36% rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. It's very upsetting. It is fun. It kind of appeals to the kid in me. This is actually the first James Bond movie that I saw in the theater. There's an opening sequence where James Bond is on his, basically he takes a ski from one of those snowmobiles and is literally the world's first snowboarder, sung to the tune of California Girls by the Beach Boys. I thought that was great. Now, granted, it's kind of childish, and there's a lot of scenes like that that are childish. But I liked it, I have a soft spot in my heart for Roger Moore, no matter how old he gets, okay? Again, other people didn't care for it as much. You be the judge. It is still streaming instantly on Netflix. So check it out. Watch it. Send me your favorite scenes, favorite quotes, questions, and comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Next week, I'm going to stay in the action genre. I am going to be doing Lethal Weapon, starring the controversial Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Gary Busey. The list goes on and on. Sadly, it is not streaming instantly on Netflix. So dust off your old copy, watch it, go down to the video store, whatever that is, Redbox, I don't know. Watch it and send me your thoughts and feelings about Lethal Weapon. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. Well, my dear, I take it you spend a lot of time in the saddle. I don't know what that was. I guess that was my horrible Roger Moore impression. I need to work on it, clearly. So, thank you for joining us next week. Lethal Weapon with Mel Gibson. Be well.